In this video, we're going to cover 3 different UI elements: icons, images, and buttons. Now, if you want to add icons to your interface, a great place to find them is a site called icons8.com. The website offers a large library of icons in various styles that you can resize, recolor, and add padding to, all for a low monthly subscription fee. My most important recommendation for using icons is to use a consistent icon style across your UI. At XMPRO, we use the Windows 10 style from Icons 8 in all of our elements. Consistent icons help to reinforce the familiarity that your user has with the interface. Secondly, icons should convey meaning, and they need to be easy to recognize. For example, if you want to create a launch button using an icon, a rocket would be a good choice. But what if you want to use an icon that's difficult to recognize and not commonly used? Well, then you need to pair it with a text label where possible. And finally, when you use icons, it's important to make them large enough to tap easily if they're going to be used on mobile. Now let's look at images. Blurry images make an interface look unprofessional and they detract from the user experience. The best way to ensure that your images are crisp and clear is to use them at 2 times the resolution to optimize for Retina displays. Mac users have Retina displays, and this simple tweak will greatly improve their experience. If your image needs to be 300 by 600 pixels in the interface, it's ideal to use an image that is double the size, so 600 by 1200 pixels. But you also don't want the page to take forever to load, so one thing I recommend is to compress your images using something like tinypng.com. This tool will help you compress your images without losing any resolution quality. Now let's look at buttons. There are a few things that you need to consider when adding buttons to your interface. Firstly, you want to emphasize the positive action in general. On the left, you'll see an example of 2 identical buttons except for the text in their labels. Ideally, you want to point the user to the action you think they want to take. In this case, it's to approve something. You'll see that we changed the styling on the reject button to give it an outline and no fill on the right. Next, you want your buttons to be easily recognized as something clickable. You can do this by adding things like rounded corners and drop shadows, which will help your user understand that this is a clickable element. You need to stay consistent with button styling in your interface. On the left, we have buttons styled in a variety of ways, and this can be confusing to your users. They might not recognize that something is actually a button. Whereas on the right, you're using a consistent style, and where you want to direct the user to the default choice, you can use outline instead of fill, like we did on the delete button. As I mentioned earlier, you want your buttons and icons to be easy to click or touch. Consider making any touch targets for mobile at least 48 by 48 pixels, or a minimum of 10 by 10 millimeters. So you'll see that the items on the left are not ideal for use on mobile because your finger is probably bigger than the icon. And if there's something close to it, you'll end up tapping the wrong thing. Whereas on the right, you have large touch targets that make it much easier to interact with the interface. Finally, the labels you write on your buttons should invite action. This also gets back to the familiarity principle that we talked about in our first video. Rather than asking the user to say yes or no, choose labels with verbs. Words like approve or reject, delete, save, cancel, undo, these words clearly invite the action you want the user to take. Now that you know how to style different elements in your UI, we're going to look at the final piece of the design puzzle. In the next video, we're going to be covering chart types and when to use which type of chart depending on your data.